If you look around your home, you probably see a lot of items that are made from plastic, whether they're single-use plastics or they're multi-use plastics. Plastics are just in our home. I'm looking at my desk right now. I have a microphone, I have a computer ahead in front of me. I have two monitors. I have a recorder that is plastic. Everything, my camera has plastic. My lights have plastic. There's a lot of plastic in what I'm looking at. My phone that I'm looking at as well. There's a lot of plastic. And we need to reduce the amount of plastic that we have. But wouldn't it be great that we could have all these items and it's not made from plastic, but it's made from something that's a little bit more sustainable? When it breaks down in the environment or goes into the environment, it's not going to be harmful to people or animals. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be wonderful to reduce plastic pollution by not having plastic anymore and making it from something different? Well, we're going to talk about that in today's episode because there is a substance that's in a seafood, shellfish to be exact, that could be a replacement for plastic. We're going to talk about that on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. I just wanted to give a shout out to people who are new to this podcast, as well as our longtime listeners, or even just you've discovered this podcast or you haven't listened to this podcast in a while, or you've been listening to it for a few months. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And I want to make you aware that not only do you get information about the oceans on this episode and all these episodes from this podcast, but we also have a newsletter that you can subscribe to where you get ocean information Monday to Friday every week. It's something that I've been trying out, that I've been starting, and it's been really good. It has 3 articles. It has a description of the podcast when we release the podcast. Has some other podcasts you can listen to right from your email on your computer. But it's also got some job advertisements that I like to pick out every day for those Monday to Friday. So check that out. You can go to speakupforblue.com/newsletter. That's speakupforblue.com/newsletter in case you want to get more aware of, a lot of these are stories that I don't really get to share on a regular basis on this episode. It's just usually quick hits. And so I wanted to share that with you so that you get more information on the ocean so you can make a better decision on how you act for the ocean. Let's get into today's episode. We got a bit of a good news story, which is nice to see. And we're talking about ocean plastic pollution, which is obviously not a good news story. When we look at pollution, it's made from petroleum. It's a petroleum product, and we see it everywhere. We see it everywhere in our lives. We see it in our homes. We see it in our cars, in our trucks, in our EVs, and everywhere. We need plastic to live in today's society. And I find it always interesting when people are talking about the climate crisis and having to change our ways and having to get away from petroleum projects. A lot of, or just maybe a few politicians who are against changing for climate change or doing anything about climate change or even denying its even existence or that we're causing it, the first argument they say, well, look at your phone. Like, you're holding a device that is made from plastic. Like, you rely on this. I'm like, yes, we rely on it. But wouldn't it be great if we had something else that wasn't petroleum based? Wouldn't it be great that we were able to make these devices that were actually sustainable when we had to throw them out or when we had to either recycle them or do something different? Well, we might have that opportunity in the next few years because there's a lab out of the University of Connecticut, I believe, who have discovered a way to extract chitin, which is I guess an ingredient or protein within the shells of crabs, lobsters, crustaceans, shrimp, where it could be the basis for plastic. And it's long been known that you can use chitin for these types of products or create something very similar to plastic, but not petroleum based. And that would actually break down nicely within an environment. So if you threw it out or if you threw it into, if it got into the ocean somehow or what have you, it would be more sustainable than the products that we have today that we make out of petroleum based plastics. The problem is, historically, is that chitin has been a very difficult thing to extract. And normally you have to use hydrochloric acid or other harmful substances like corrosive substances that would actually pollute, water or the system's land, water, whatever that might be to extract. So it would actually release a lot of like gases and things like that of its use in a larger facility or a larger scale. So they haven't really been using chitin because of its very problematic and difficult way of, and to be honest, wasteful and polluting ways of actually extracting the chitin from the shells, the wasteful, like, the shells of crab, shrimp, and lobster. After you eat it, you throw it out, right? You're going to throw it into the garbage, or, if you're eating at a restaurant, they're going to take it, they're going to throw it into the garbage. Well, now you can actually take it and you can use non-toxic, biocompatible, and cost-effective byproducts of the biodiesel industry. So apparently they're using things like choline chloride. It's a salt that's frequently used as a food additive. They're using glycerol, both like organic. They're basically using organic acids to help with this process, and they're actually able. So it's glycerol, choline chloride, and either lactic acid or malic acid. And these unique combinations each formed what the researchers describe as a solvent that was rich in hydrogen bonds, meaning that they can give away those hydrogen bonds because it essentially overpowers and shatters the original bonds in the shellfish material, from there enabling the separation and release of chitin from other compounds in the shell's complex matrix. So it's able to take that out, but it's also not harmful when you dispose of those chemicals. That's huge. That's a big, big discovery that could have a lot of wonderful applications to how we look at products in the future. And with the amount of seafood waste that we have, usually it's about 6 million tons of seafood in the US alone every year. It's more in Asia. And so there's a lot of, chitin in the world. I think there's like 100 million tons of chitin are made every year. So obviously it's a sustainable product. It's not something that you have to use harmful substances to extract, and you can make things out of it that'll break down sustainably. This is a huge win for, what we're looking at here as making new products. And this is the innovation that we require to get out of things like depending on fossil fuels to build our products, depending on petroleum products and fossil fuels to create things that we need to depend on, so that now politicians can say, oh, you know what, your products are made of petroleum. It's like, actually, it's made of chitin, which is not a petroleum-based product, and it's actually better for the environment. So there are alternative ways. And investing money into businesses and into grants and labs and research that look at innovative ways to find differences in the way we make products that are more sustainable and better for the environment is extremely important in the way we move forward to a more sustainable world. I feel like a lot of people are and I've talked about this over the last couple of weeks, so I'm not going to focus too much on it. A lot of people are just so, resistant to change, resistance to what we know and love, and look at new things like this as discouraging. And why would we bother when we have this wonderful product in front of us? Well, things need to change. We are in a global crisis here. We are seeing changes, and this is only going to increase at an exponential rate. Those changes, the storms, the flooding, the droughts, the wildfires, all those things are going to increase exponentially as they continue to happen, as we continue to pollute the planet. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, which we are reducing, but not fast enough. And we need to get away from products and items that we use that are petroleum-based, that are fossil fuel-based, so that we can actually have a more sustainable environment. And this is where it gets tricky. This is where it really gets tricky, is when it comes to the laws and policies and the government aid, like the subsidies that will help, or the research and grant money that will help fuel these type of innovative research projects that will help a better future for us. And that every government politician should be looking at that. Whether you are, backed by the fossil fuel industry, whether you are against change, whether you're conservative, liberal, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you fall on, you should be investing money into projects that look at innovative ways to change how we live in a more sustainable way. Right? That should be the focus of a lot of governments. We should be diversifying our outputs. We should be diversifying our GDP. We should be diversifying the way we attack problems. And that is investing significant amount of money into this research for projects that will change our lives, and projects that might not fizzle out to anything. Still try and encourage this type of innovation. Without it, we just go backwards and say, hey, you know what? Things are fine if we don't talk about it. That's just not the way we can do this. We can't ignore climate changing anymore. It is affecting the way we live. It's affecting how governments spend their money, because now we're spending money on clearing up all of this debris and the fires and insurance and all this kind of stuff, where people are dying, where their lives are changed, where just damages is done beyond repair, and it's causing billions, if not trillions of dollars a year to be able to change this, to be able to pay for all of this. We're getting to a point where we just can't ignore it, and we have to change. Some governments are trying to change. They may not be changing enough, and they may not be going about it where everybody agrees or disagrees with how it goes, but we need to do something to change it, and we need to be very scientific in the approach. And what I mean by that is we need to not just be like, it's either this or that, right? We need to just say, hey, you know what? This worked a little bit, but we need more. Or this didn't work at all. We need to understand we tried this, it didn't work. Let's try something else. And if that causes a change in the government system, that's fine. But I'm really, really tired of seeing governments come in, like a different party be in charge of the government because they're elected, and then they just take away everything that we learn and go back to doing nothing. And that's what my big fear is when we have a change in government and they just don't want to do anything about climate change. We need to do something about climate change. We need to divest our resources from fossil fuels to other things, especially here in my country, in Canada. We focus too much, our economy is too focused on fossil fuels. It's too focused on natural, sort of like development, and natural resource development. We need to focus on something else. We need to focus on innovative projects like this. And whether we are or not, it should be published more. Right? It should be, we should see it more. We should talk about it more. We should talk about what's good, what's not working, what's working. This is what we need to do as a transparent government in the US and Canada, in Europe, in Africa, like all over Africa, like, in Asia, everywhere, Australia, all the places around the world. The governments need to be more transparent in how we innovate, how we change the game, because somebody out there or people out there are working their butts off to try and make more sustainable products. And how many times are businesses that are based in fossil fuels just, causing havoc with those projects, or just ending those projects early before anything can be done, so that they can keep their greedy hands on the money that they make all the time, because it's a monopoly. Like in Canada, we are focused on fossil fuels. That's what we do. Our economy is tied to it. We have the entire province of Alberta that is tied to the tar sands. You just can't, it's just not sustainable. We see the boom and bust of the oil industry, and it's just not sustainable here in Canada, and as well as other places across the US and across the world. And we just need to change those things. And innovation is how we do it. And this paper that came out in International Journals of Biological Macromolecules, a paper that I'd never even heard of before, by these authors is extremely important to discuss. And I'm glad the Anthropocene magazine put it out. I really am glad. And I'm going to put a link to that article in the show notes, because this is something that we need to hear more about. We need to explore these options. We need to follow up with these options, and we need to fund these options, to be honest. And I'm glad to see that this project is moving forward. They're getting the right patents, and they're opening up to hopefully other research labs to be able to collaborate with them to discover more, or they discover it on themselves. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but I would love to track this problem to say, hey, chitin has a big potential as a biodegradable replacement for plastic packaging. But now the research team are going to now look into specific use. They're going to also look at use of turning salvaged chitin into a nutrient-rich fertilizer for crops. This is great. They're hoping that they can turn this trash into a treasure, or at least into a valuable added product. This is what we need. This is exactly what we need. So I want to know how you feel about this, how you feel about using chitin, concerns or hope or optimism around this. Love to hear your thoughts. Hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. You can also subscribe to our newsletter if you go to speakupforblue.com/newsletter. And let me know how you feel once you get those newsletters, what you think about it, what you think about the articles. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.